We have a quorum, so calling the meeting to order. Can I get an approval of the meeting minutes from June 2nd, 2014?
Motion to approve.
Have change?
Please, yeah.
Just a spelling correction on communications. It should be animal warden instead of animal warder. That's it.
Great.
On communications, the last page.
Any other changes? With that change to the minutes, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Now we have citizen comment, and I am going to start this evening with citizen comment. Everyone has 3 minutes to come up and talk. When you come up to the mic, state your name and your address, and say what you want to say in those 3 minutes. We're going to start with Matthew Terry. Welcome, Matthew.
I'm Matthew Terry. I'm not a citizen of Evanston. I'm a citizen of Lake Forest, 1286 Lawrence Avenue. I'm speaking on behalf of a Chicago-based organization called Food and Water Watch, and I'm working in Evanston this summer. I've come to speak to you today to tell you about the abuse of antibiotics and their dangerously waning effectiveness. Maybe you had a parent who contracted pneumonia, or maybe a child had strep throat. Well, with antibiotics, these infections aren't a big deal, but without effective antibiotics, these conditions become quite serious. In this April, the World Health Organization released a report warning that antibiotics are losing their effectiveness. According to another report released by the CDC, each year in the United States, 2 million people become infected with bacteria that are resistant to antibiotics, and at least 23,000 people die as a result of these infections. And both these reports point to the misuse of antibiotics in food animals as a critical piece of this problem. And right now, 80% of antibiotics sold in the United States by weight are used in agriculture. But rather than being used to treat sick animals, the majority of these antibiotics are fed to healthy animals in low doses to make them grow faster in crowded, filthy conditions. This practice creates the perfect breeding ground for bacteria that are resistant to antibiotics, many of which are the same drugs we rely on to treat infections in people. So what do? Well, we have to make the choice to act now before we enter a horrific post-antibiotics world. By demanding that factory farms stop misusing antibiotics, we can turn the tide on this frightening public health crisis. Congress should pass the Preservation of Antibiotics for Medical Treatment Act in the House and the Prevention of Antibiotic Resistance Act in the Senate, and stop the misuse of medically important antibiotics on factory farms. But if Congress is going to be convinced to act, we need to hear from community leaders like you. Local communities like Cleveland, Ohio, Seattle, Washington, Madison, Wisconsin, and St. Paul, Minnesota are passing resolutions to urge Congress to support these pieces of legislation and help end the misuse of antibiotics in agriculture. Just 2 weeks ago, at the recommendation of Dr. Kocher, the Commissioner of the Chicago Department of Public Health, the Chicago City Council also called on Congress to pass PAMTA and PARA, and by passing the resolution equivalent to this one. This summer, the Evanston City Council should join them and pass the Healthy Farms, Healthy Families resolution that I bring to you today. We at Food and Water Watch, along with our Evanston Coalition partners, Jill King Studios, Artist Seeds, and Walsh Natural Foods, as long as many Illinois and national organizational sign-ons, as well as over 150 Evanston residents who signed a petition in favor of this resolution, urge the City Council to take action. In order to build pressure on Congress, our teams are working across the country to pass resolutions by the end of the summer to send a strong, clear message about the urgency of the issue. I hope you will join in sounding the alarm to demand action to control the spread of resistance. We can choose another path, one that protects our life-saving antibiotics and supports the production of healthy food for all. It's time for Evanston to take a stand. We'll be reaching out to our membership in Evanston, and we'd like to know when you plan on introducing the resolution to City Council. I would ask you to introduce the resolution next Monday, the 14th. And I wish to give you this folder, which contains the following information. Informational materials on the issue, the sign letter with its signed-on organizations, petition signed in Evanston, the testimony of David Bain for Chicago's Finance Committee supporting Chicago's resolution, and the resolution itself. Thank you.
Great. So you can hand that to me. Thank you. And then I have does anybody have any questions? Or if we put it on the agenda for the Human Services for the next committee meeting, would it be possible to have a more formal presentation about this topic?
What day would that be? That would be August something.
Now you're taxing my brain. Or August 4th.
August 4th. Well, I will be out of town, so there's not an intern to replace me for that amount of time. So it's very possible that my supervisor will be able to come down here and give a more formal presentation. That's all I can say for now.
put you in touch to talk about that? Would that be okay?
Yeah, I'd love to speak to you after the meeting, give you my information, but also our card is in that folder.
Great, thank you for coming.
Thank you very much,
Appreciate it.
everybody.
Bonnie Wilson. I was looking for you in the back, and there you are.
Thank you, Chairman Burris and Alderman. I'm Bonnie Wilson. I live at 530 Hinman, and I'm the former Township Assessor of Evanston. Since nothing has been announced since the township was dissolved on April 30th, and everyone has now received their second installment of their tax bills, I would like to let the taxpayers of Evanston know about the new office which is run by the City of Evanston. The new office name is the Tax Assessment Review Office. They're at room 1450 at the Civic Center at 2100 Ridge, next to the city clerk's office. The phone number is 847-448-8168. That's 847-448-8168. Or call 311 if you are in Evanston. Mitzi Gibbs is still temporary in the office and doing a superb job in helping the Evanston taxpayers. I'm asking the Evanston taxpayers to please check your tax bill and make sure you received all the exemptions that you are entitled to receive. If you did not receive an exemption, please call Mitzi and she will be happy to help you. Remember, if you want to appeal your assessment, you cannot do that until the Board of Review opens. I do not have the date for when the Board of Review will open. Mitzi can let you know that information when it becomes available. Thank you.
Bonnie, could you just let people know what are some of the exemptions they should be looking for?
Sure. The homeowner's exemption, senior exemption, and that's for everybody over 65. All taxpayers over 65 and over can receive a senior exemption. People get confused. They think it's just the senior freeze. There is a senior freeze that you had to apply for in January, which is people over 65 whose income is less than $55,000, and there's the disabled exemption. So any of those exemptions that were not on your tax bill, they should call Mitzi.
Great, thank you, appreciate it. Junad Risky?
Junad Risky, 2784 Sheridan. Several council meetings ago, Wally stated a few members of the public keep on complaining the city never does anything right. Then he went on to claim what a great job the city had done with medical benefits, and the employees clapped. Tonight, I'd like to ask him to explain to me why has it taken over 2 years for staff to basically come up with the non-payment of rent for the next theater. This is 2 years, rent hasn't been paid, it appears. This is not a matter really to me that concerns me because, frankly, this is money we taxpayers were owed and never collected. So why are we told now about this? Why did the city re-sign a lease, basically, when there hadn't been payment of rent? I mean, who's running the city here? That's really a good question. Who's responsible here for these types of things? I keep on, as some of you know, questioning the things that are going on in the water department. There seems to be a lot of parallels. I'm worried about the bad debt there. Whether all these delinquent water bills really are being basically not accounted for, and really whether we're collecting the money. Basically, what it amounts to, the city books are no good. Basically, that's what it amounts to, because if you're saying you're collecting revenue and the revenue's not coming in, your books are not accurate, and that's a problem. Plain and simple, we have bad debt here, and now we're going to sign a contract with no collateral to continue this? That's really more interesting. Why would we continue this and then supposedly create a loan? It doesn't make any sense. This is really poor fiscal management, and it really reflects on the council members that would approve such a thing here. I guess I could FOIA the city to ask the city questions about all the other loans and obligations the city has that are never paid. And basically, you know, I noticed tonight we're talking about a 3% reduction. Well, I think we ought to outsource basically who's ever responsible for all these contracts and economic development collections of money and put them out to a private company where somebody can actually do the work and keep after the people that owe the money. Because frankly, this has happened before with with this apartment behind the Civic Center that went on for years, too. So there's a pattern here of really gross mismanagement of our resources and money, and this has gone on and on. So maybe we can eliminate one city employee and outsource this. And also, if anyone says this is trivial, I've been to numerous budget hearings where $10,000 has been discussed for a half hour. So it's not trivial. This is a fair amount of money, and it's basically lost. Thank you.
Mary Rosinski. And after Mary, it'll be Doris Johnson. I think that's right.
Hi, thank you. Mary Rosinski, 1729 Chancellor, and I'm here on behalf of Evanston Park and Lakefront Alliance, and we just wanted to state our support of the keeping the Harley Clark Mansion in the public domain and working with the IDNR. We're very hoping that that will work out or something along those lines, so thank you.
And I apologize, it's Doria Johnson. Sometimes I can't read it all correctly. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Doria Johnson. I live in the city of Chicago. I'm here today representing a group of concerned citizens, and we are overwhelmingly concerned about the Evanston Police stop and frisk policies. In 2013, there were 1,533 stops, 203 youth. In 2012, there were 1,547 stops, 284 youth, overwhelmingly Black, overwhelmingly Hispanic. Blacks are only 17% of the population here in Evanston, but 80% of the stop and frisk stops, and we're asking why. Usually stop and frisk results in only 2 to 3% convictions around the country, and this is why it's become problematic. And so that becomes a system of harassment. Chief Eddington has admitted that in the city of Evanston, they know who the frequent flyers are. So now we're concerned about why are our good kids being stopped. Since I've moved back here in January, I've talked to probably 50 kids, and almost all of them say that they have been stopped and asked questions by the Evanston police. And so we just want to stand here today and to let you know that we are talking to our children, and we are gathering data, and we are analyzing the data, and then we'll be back. Thank you.
Diane Britton. Are you Diane? Thank you.
Good afternoon. Well, good evening. I usually don't come to these meetings, but I live at 1929 Jackson, and my concern is with all the killing of the Black teenagers here in Evanston, or the young adults. Me and a few other grandparents, we want the city to help us to get an organization together to get our kids back on the streets, have them put down the guns, stop killing. I went to a funeral today. 10 minutes ago, we had another shooting. Fortunately, this child ain't dead, but I need you guys to help us to stop this killing. When I moved to Evanston 40 years ago, I could sleep with my doors open. Today, I'm afraid to walk down the street. I've been a crossing guard at Reed and Greenleaf for the past 7 years. The last kid we buried, Alante, I was his crossing guard. And I'm just tired of seeing this. I have 2 grandsons of my own. So, I don't know, I might be the next grandparents put my child in the grave. We want help. And there's grandparents and parents out here willing to work with the police and work with the city to just stop the shooting. Let's stop the killing. So, if y'all can give us some type of solution, we're willing to do it.
And I believe that we have the Parks and Rec youth, I'm sorry, who's in charge of? Thank you.
Yeah, McCray, and Kevin Brown for the Youth and Young Adult Division. So we are working on some issues with that.
Yeah.
But that's not putting down the guns. That's not getting rid of the guns.
You're
And I heard
absolutely
a few
right.
other people say about to stop and search. I have no problem with it. If it's going to save their lives, stop them and search them.
And I was saying, and Mr. McCray, I believe, is in the back. And is the chief, yeah, and you've met with Mr. McCray?
No.
Okay.
I met him at the funeral today.
Okay.
Who was at the funeral today?
And I believe he's spearheading with youth activity and working with the police. He's nodding at me as that's a yes. So I think that is something we've been working on, but more voices added to this, more people in the community to be involved and taking back your community as well. I think it's block by block, and
Well, I live at 1929 Jackson. I'm taking my block back.
and that's exactly, I think, what Mr. McCray will probably end up saying in those regard. But he is happy to talk with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anybody else want to add anything to that?
I think that we just need to let everyone know that we are serious about trying to do something about it, but it's going to take all of us working together. We bury too many kids. Too many kids get shot daily. But it's us, and it's going to take all of us. It's just not because it happens in one part of the community. It affects the whole community, so it needs everyone's help in terms of doing this. So I'm hoping that we can all come together to try to figure out a solution.
Thank you, Alderman Holmes. And I'm going to continue on with, I'm sorry, did you have okay. With list, but there's a gold Chevy SUV with lights on in the parking lot, in case it's yours and you don't want your car trapped. Herb Harms.
My name is Herb Harms. I live at 2133 Crawford in Evanston. And I just wanted to comment about the Harley Clark plans, which I think is wonderful, where the state organization is going to be moving in there, I think, next year. And I think that'll help the whole lakefront for everybody, and I think that's very good. But there's one thing that I was a little concerned about a little bit, and I thought I might mention it to you. The Lighthouse Beach, of course, is very popular with a lot of people in the park there, and I think that North Evanston has a lot more little children nowadays. It seems there's a lot more children around, and I don't think there's enough parking there. I think we could use about at least 50 more parking spaces, at the Lighthouse Beach area, and they could probably easily do that. Where that garage is now, or the Harley Clark garage, maybe they could put it in there. But in other words, I think we need more. Maybe not a lot more, but at least 50 spaces. I just wanted to mention that. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Gerald Adler. Thank you.
My name is Gerald Adler. I live at 2235 Wesley, retired school teacher. I hope the city will resolve its problem with the next theater and extend their lease. We are now entering a political campaign year in which public funds and private donations will be made to support political candidates. I would suggest if we can support political candidates and debates on televisions, which are worthless in many cases, and can support amateur entertainers and actors, sometimes called politicians, then we can support real actors and entertainers at the next theater. I have found more profound insights on the world in the next theater, particularly a recent production called The Luck of the Irish, than I've ever found in my many 35 years of teaching in Chicago. And I have found more insight into their plays than I have found in going to school board debates or political debates. The entertaining is on a higher level at the next theater by better actors, and I have worked in the political sphere as well. There are many people in this city who will be writing checks for political actors and entertainers who are not as good as the ones in the next theater. They could bail out that theater with their own checks, including some financial angels in this city who will remain unnamed. Let them put their money where their mouth is. Right now in Chicago, they've cut back, for example, the arts and music and so on. And that's very tragic. I find it insulting and degrading in this country that we spend more money on military bands than the whole National Endowment for the Arts. I have tried to persuade some of my Democratic candidates to support legislation which would give more money to the arts than we ever do in this country. It is appalling. It is disgusting. The Minnesota Orchestra almost folded. The New York City Center Opera went out of business. You know, it's too bad we don't have the Cold War going on, because during the Cold War, we wanted to compete with Russia in the arts as well as the Olympics. We had a ticker tape parade for Van Cliburn, which had more attention, I would suggest, than the St. Patrick's Day, Columbus Day parade, and Caribbean parade all put together. Maybe we need some competition from Russia in the arts so we can get our own act together. Also, my children went to the Noyes School, and the use of that school as an arts center is a tremendous thing. It is a marvelous building. We should support the arts and not just the amateur actors and politicians that we're writing checks for, and I've written checks for them also. But you know, actors and entertainers are also employees, and they're underemployed. And we do very, very little in this district, including our congresspeople and our legislators, to support actors and entertainers who are a very, very big portion of the people in Evanston. And we should not take advantage of them. So my suggestion is today, if you can support the amateur entertainers and politicians who are not as effective in many ways, let's support the real ones and the professionals as well. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. That's all I have signed up for comment. Is there anybody else that didn't sign up? Yeah, Mary. Yeah, of course.
In light of what we were just talking about with the shootings in Evanston, the DJ Coleman Foundation this July 12th is having an open, free discussion at the Heartwood, and it's based on the book, How Long Will I Cry? Voices of Youth Violence. This is one of many things that are going to be going on. There's another group in Evanston we're hoping to connect with that's doing something. The library is using it as their reading initiative. So and what we were saying is bringing people together to really start talking about this. This book is incredibly powerful. It's about 50 short stories of people who have been affected by violence. So I would welcome everybody to come and be part of the discussion. You don't have to have read the book. Thank you.
Thank you. So we're moving on for items for discussion. We have a Harley Clark update. Cindy, you're up. You did so well finding Alderman Grover. Now you're up for this one.
For this as well.
And you did a great job of finding Mr. Bobkowitz as well. 2 for 2 tonight. I just need to call on you.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, good evening. We've not been back to give you an update on our discussions with the Illinois Department of Natural Resources for a few months, so we wanted to do that this evening. Those discussions have continued. Really have been focusing on the improvements to the building, and we've been able to take the various work that has been done by the city, by the Tawny Foundation, as well as some work that the state of Illinois has done, plus the Evanston Arts Center, and I think we have now come up with a scope of work for the improvements, as we detailed in the staff report, about off $5 million. The state of Illinois feels they can move forward with that. I think really the last piece of the bigger picture is the timing of this. They're looking now to do this over 2 state fiscal years. We've just started the 14-15 state fiscal year, July 1, so there would be some improvements that would be done between the first part of the year and June 30th, and then the additional improvements done in 15-16. So they're still on track. We are now, it's in the hands of the lawyers, Jeff Smith, an Evanston resident who is the general counsel for the Department of Natural Resources. He'll be meeting with Ms. Plant and Grant Farrar Corporation Counsel over the next few weeks to hammer out an agreement that would stipulate how this will all work. We hope to have that back to you probably not in August, but hopefully in September. We've also talked about having an additional community meeting to share the final terms of any agreement. So the state is very anxious to do that, as are we. So that would occur probably during the month of September. So our hope would be to have this all wrapped up September, first part of October. The timing would still be that the state would take control of the building sometime after the first of the year. As you know, the council has ended the lease with the Evanston Arts Center on January 31. My understanding from the Evanston Arts Center is they continue to move forward, looking at options for their relocation, and they are, I think, feeling hopeful that they are coming to a conclusion with that fairly shortly. They will likely need some additional time. I think the amount of additional time they would need will probably work with the state's needs, so we're talking probably 30, 60 additional days. So we'll continue to talk with the state on that as we negotiate a final agreement. But I wanted to let the committee know that those discussions continue. The state believes that they will be able to make the necessary improvements to the building over what will likely be a 2-year period, but with occupancy sometime during calendar 2015, and that's, I think, very positive. So we're not looking at an extended period where the building would be unoccupied. I think that shortly after the Art Center would move out, the state would begin making the improvements and then hopefully occupy the building later during the course of calendar 2015.
Alderman Fisk, do you have a question? It's coming up as Wynn, so I'm assuming it was you and not
I
Peter.
did. I turned on my light. Wally, could you talk about the funding? And of the $5 million, is the city of Evanston being asked to bear any portion of that?
At this point, the city is not being asked to bear any portion of that. I think the state is looking at a variety of different funding sources. I think those, unless Mr. Smith wishes to speak to that, I think just looking at various funding sources, I don't believe there's any question at this point in the mind of the Department of Natural Resources that those dollars are reasonable for them to be able to obtain to move forward with the improvements, or we would not be continuing discussions. So that's the first question, I think, with each of our discussions is everything still on track on the state side? And we had a conversation as recently as last week, and we are continuing to be given the information that they still feel that money will be available to them.
Alderman Grover?
I just want to mention that, as you know, the whole Lighthouse Landing area is a conglomeration of different property owners, the city, the Lighthouse Park District. I think there's another as well that I'm forgetting. But Mr. Bob Quitz and I met recently with the board of directors of the Lighthouse Park District and filled them in, same information as tonight. This was a couple weeks ago, so that they were up to speed, and also had the same discussion with the Lighthouse Landing Committee, which is the group of those who are responsible, the garden clubs who maintain the gardens in and around the lighthouse. Is our lighthouse keeper, who also is the executive director of the Lighthouse Park District Board, just to bring them all up to speed about the status of our discussions with the IDNR. And they've been just generally supportive in a lot of the same questions that have been asked by the other community along the way.
Right. Alderman Fisk?
Yeah, thank you, Alderman Grover. I would just like to make sure that you include in the discussions I don't remember the formal name, the Lakefront Alliance, Park and Lakefront Alliance, are the newly formed group, so that they're at the table as well.
Mr. Smith, did you have you're back there, so did you want to say something?
It's nice to see you again, and it's always nice to be here in any capacity. I remain a citizen of Evanston. I didn't fall off the face of the earth, and it's a pleasure to be able to serve the citizens here in a different capacity for the state. we've heard basically nothing but positive feedback about the Department of Natural Resources being able to partner with the City of Evanston and work on this project. We know there's an amazing synergy between what we have in mind and what already exists there. To put a coastal management program right on the coast could not be a better fit to be able to leverage what poll after poll says is the greatest attribute of Evanston, namely the lake, and be able to reinforce and underscore that asset and be able to help brand Evanston is an incredible opportunity. We want to reassure the community that we've heard secondhand that some folks think this is myth or it's just wishful thinking. We are completely serious about this, and as we move forward, some of the principles that will be foremost in how we approach it is that we're committed to preserving the public nature of the property, ideally in perpetuity. We want to preserve and expand on, if at all, change the public uses, but preserving them foremost. Preserving the public access to the amenities that are there, preserving the historic aspects of the building, which are important architecturally and do play into some of the costs that we'll encounter, and above all, be listening to the community in its desires for how this property can be used. Mr. Bobkowitz correctly noted that there's been some concerns about funding. We've heard some of those concerns from the community, and it's true that the anticipated stream of funding for this project when we first rolled it out was Coastal Zone Management Fund, since people say, well, how do we know that the federal government is going to be dependable with those? There's obviously risk when we live in a democracy, and administrations can change, and philosophies of administrations can change. Congresses and legislatures can change. If we become paralyzed by that, we would never go forward on anything long term. But we are looking at ways to make the funding more robust, especially since the Coastal Zone Management Program does not necessarily comprehend the type of much larger infusions than we were perhaps initially talking about here. So typical ways that government tries to fund things, as you know, are bonding. Bondability has to do with the nature of both what's on a property and the nature of the relationship between who's occupying it and the asset itself. Their general revenue funds are sometimes available for projects like this, but typically not from the state of Illinois. And with the bind it's been in, the uncertainty over extension of an income tax, the uncertainties over what's going to happen with lawsuits relating to pension reform, that's probably not a sound or prudent source of funds to look at. There are dedicated funds that could go towards a project like this, but by and large, they're for dedicated purposes. So as we move forward, I would encourage the council and the community to take an imaginative and larger vision as to possibilities, and ask ourselves, what if there was a way to preserve everything that caused hundreds of people to fill this chamber a year ago, and preserve the beach, preserve the parking for the beach, the lighthouse, the lovely park that's filled with Virginia bluebells every spring, and make the status of the property, the facilities, the O&M, and the funding all more stable at a net benefit rather than cost to the community. If DNR can find a way of doing that, we'd really like to be able to move that forward and to reinforce and help symbolize some of the great things that Evanston has to offer and introduce Evanston to a wider audience. If there's any questions?
Other questions? Thank you, Mr. Smith.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. So I think we need a motion to accept this report.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Fantastic. Thank you. Next on the list is Human Services Funding. And hopefully you've all received this in your packet. I know it's very small. And I had requested that this be compiled as a starting point for discussion about how the city is allocating funding to improve and enhance the community, which is really what CDBG, mental health, Evanston Township, emergency fund are supposed to do. And moreover, the substantial funding, how it's aligning with city council goals, and examining as well how this funding is being leveraged with other funding with not-for-profits. So we've talked a lot about this in the past, about being much more coordinated. How are we going to move the needle on specific issues? We've heard this evening from community groups, what are we going to do about the violence in the community? We hear about what we're going to do about workforce development. We hear about what we're going to do about housing, and it's very scattered. And you can see from this sheet that the funding is very scattered. It's relatively piecemeal. We're not saying we're putting a stake in the ground and saying we are going to help solve whatever problem. So again, we're not doing anything with this tonight, just more of for you to look at. Going forward, when we talk about the council goals, I think this is something we should revisit when we're looking at really, this is a lot of money that we're giving to the community, and what are we really doing? So thoughts on that, of moving in this direction to discuss it? Alderman Holmes.
No, I just think it gives us a better idea to see how the funding is distributed among the different agencies and where those particular funds that we have some kind of control over or some input to how they are being shared with the agencies that are funded by the city.
Yeah.
So it gives. I've never looked, well, when we did we used to do the unified budgeting system, we had something similar to this. So, but this gives a good idea of how to look at it in a.
Right. And I believe that the only other, or the second agency in the city that gives, I guess, the second amount of money to not-for-profits would be the Evanston Community Foundation. And it's easy enough to find out, to add what they give to this list through their 990, or we can actually ask them if they would like to share that. That's also another important component to put in this list of where their funding is being spent. So really looking at all of the funding mechanisms that are going to not-for-profits in the community, again, is a good discussion point. Alderman Grover, you're...
Yeah, I think another interesting thing to add perhaps to this chart is which of the grants are for a particular purpose, as in which ones leverage or a requirement for federal matching funds, that is, that require a local federal grant. The agencies make more of city funding than just programmatic grant funds, so there's often more to the picture. So it's a lot of the individual allocations are apples and oranges when you look at what the purpose they serve, and it's often more. The purpose is often more than just funding programs or funding operations. The purpose may be to succeed in getting federal matching funds or something. So there ought to be a way to maybe footnote or add that information to these grants as well. And I'm assuming that for each of these funders, the Township, CDBG, and Mental Health Board, we can add that information as well to the chart. But I like having it all in one place, that's for sure.
Yeah. Mr. Bobquist, did you have?
Yes, Chair Burris, members of the committee, as we've compiled this information, we have thought back to the committee's discussions looking at how this process has worked in previous years, and certainly I think that it's probably something that warrants further discussion by this committee, again, not for funding in 2015, but for funding in 2016 and beyond. Mm-hmm. And I guess a question back to the committee would be, is this something you'd like to pursue? Is it something worth putting on an agenda in August? Was it something you'd like to talk about prior to the end of the current fiscal year? What is the committee's thinking on perhaps taking the next steps now that we've gathered much of this information?
And I think it would be helpful to bring in the CDBG committee, although that's not actually the name of the committee, but that's what I call it anyway, because I think they're part of that discussion as well. So I'm, Alderman Braithwaite?
Well, I was just looking through this
Alderman Burris, and I don't think it involved, or it doesn't include the money that we spend on programming. So money out of, if you're looking for something comprehensive,
Exactly.
you probably
right.
also want to keep, you're
Exactly.
right there with me.
Yeah.
Include what we spend on youth programming as well.
So
for a fair overall
operation
vote.
versus just handing out
Exactly.
money.
Exactly.
That's a very good point.
Yeah.
And having it as two separate documents. Anybody else's feeling on having more of an in-depth conversation and working on this?
Sure, and I'm sorry, Alderman Holt.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'd want to be sure to include the agencies in this discussion, and the agencies that are receiving these funds, they would have, I think, a different perspective on how important even a 10,000 grant would be to their mission and purpose, and how well they feel integrated and collaborative with the rest of the Evanston nonprofit world in ways that perhaps serve our city council goals. So if we could find a way to include them in the conversation as well.
Alderman Holmes?
Yeah, I was just going to comment on the city's goals in terms of how we match that. In terms of the money that we spend for programming from the city directly, I see that as sort of a really different animal. Maybe we can list it, but I don't know how that meshes with this. I'm willing to listen. Because then we'd have to go and look at how every arts program, every Park and Recreation Department, every center, you'd have to put all of that together because all of those things would serve different people. So I see that as real different than looking at what we are actually distributing to other agencies to provide some of those services that we do not provide. Now, if we want to start talking about is there overlapping, then I'm willing to talk about that.
Well, I guess what I'll wait and see, and I know you're sitting on the Cradle to Careers Committee, and I don't want to open up that can of worms, but I think we were real specific in our last conversation that we want to define our target population where we're going to focus our efforts in the city. And so I think as you begin to define that population, then we'll look back at this budget and see where the city is having an impact on that defined group. That's where I see this information being useful, and that's what I was getting at.
I think in our council goals, we defined it as at-risk families.
Right.
I mean, a lot of this money falls within that council goal.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Chair Burris, would you like us to perhaps communicate to the Community and Economic Development Committee? I call it the CDBG.
I call it
committee, too.
CDBG. Thank you, Sarah. Sarah would have the right answer. That would be great, and to start having this more of a robust, even in more of a committee type format of where are the ways that we, with our programming as well as the money we're giving, are those really in concert with each other, or are they? Are we looking at a complementary, or are we not really, are we just, again, doing more of a piecemeal approach? I think, I'm going to the Mental Health Board meeting on Thursday night and want to talk with them. I know there's some folks from here, but they need to be part of this conversation of what is it that we want to accomplish here in Evanston. That's something that the City Council, we talk about with goals. We have, so many issues around the violence and youth. And we say over and over again, we have people come here, what are you going to do? How are we going to make this change? And really, are we going to say that's what we're going to change? And with all of our resources, can we change that? Or is it something else? Or are we just going to continue on the way we are? I just feel we have such power here to do something. Let's make a stand and let's do it.
So are you thinking that perhaps a joint meeting with not only the Housing and Community Development Act Committee, but the Mental Health Board with this committee?
I think it would be a good, just to have a conversation, just really think about it and get their viewpoint on it as well. What does it matter? They're giving out funding. We're giving them a pot of money. They're deciding on who that goes to. How are they making that decision? Are they thinking about the council goals? The Mental Health Board probably aren't hearing the same things we hear, the same things we know, aren't hearing from the same constituents, aren't getting the daily updates on violence and shootings, and that happens. that's not what they're hearing. And for all of us to be in a room to say what is so important to us and how are we going to make that change versus, again, looking at it in a siloed fashion. And I would like thoughts on this. I mean, I think we have the power here to make a difference. Let's do it.
I think we also have to remember that a lot of the funding that we do now is not necessarily going to was certainly not funded to deal with some of the issues that we're dealing with now. That's what I'm saying. We may have to look at how we are going to reallocate or do something different, because I think that, different agencies, we have funded them for different services, and I think they provide those. If we need, and that's why I said we have to keep on our city goals, because if we are going to change that, then we need to have that conversation with folk before.
Right. Yeah.
before
And
that
this isn't a, we're going to do sort of, but we're talking about a vision. We want to make this the most livable city in the country. We have to stop the violence if that's going to be the case. We have to. No question. And I'm not sure that we would get much discussion or disagreement from anybody, no matter what ward we live in, what our pet causes are. If we don't stop the violence, we're not going to have that most livable city, and it's going to affect every one of us in every capacity of our life.
Absolutely.
So, Madam Chair, why don't you let staff work between now and your
Put
August
something
meeting
together.
and come up with some ideas and look at some dates perhaps during the month of September. And
Great.
we'll come back at your next meeting.
Thank you. Sorry to be so passionate about this. It's just, it's too much badness happening. City of Evanston, EPL Memorandum of Understanding. Come on up. I know, scary that I'm up here, right?
Not at all, Chairman Burris. Good evening, Chairman Burris, members of the committee. Karen Danzig-Lyons from the Evanston Public Library. As you know, we've been working through a transition committee since 2011, and Alderman Fisk and Alderman Tendem were with us, along with Wally Bobkowitz and two members of my board, Trustee Tannen, who's now our president, and Trustee Allen. And the purpose of the Memorandum of Understanding is to capture the working relationship that has been evolving since 2011 when we first began this transition. And because we've been able to work together very collaboratively over the last couple of years, what you see before you is a two-page document that really reflects what we feel are the key elements, including that the libraries are still city facilities. We are operating them. We're a municipal library, but they are city facilities, and we will work together with the city to maintain and fix any facility-related issues. The library still does the programming. In the 2014 budget, working with the city staff, we identified an amount to reimburse the city because they continue to provide us with payroll, purchasing, personnel support. And so that amount that's in our budget and will continue to be in our budget reflects the value, we feel the fair value of that reimbursement. With the new city financial and personnel systems and greater efficiency in the future, perhaps those amounts will be adjusted, but right now that is the amount that we agreed to. Also, because we are dependent upon property tax that is levied and then collected, there is sometimes a lag in the funding in our receipts, and so the city works with us to pay the reasonable expenses associated with operating the library until those tax receipts come in, and then we balance the books. We've had...
Alderman Braithwaite has a question.
Yes.
Quick question. Who's going to help you determine the repairs? Is that going to be our facilities staff, or is it someone independently hired by the library board?
We hired a consulting company to come in and do a building analysis, and they completed that at the end of last year. We have a multi-year capital plan, and in a future meeting with the City Council, when the city's facility capital plan is provided, our piece of that will be provided as well. We've shared those results with the city and with facilities management, and we continue to work with them. But it's an independent, Our main library is 20 years old now, so you would expect some of the 20-year-old systems begin to need attention. You are aware of our North Branch, which is much older than 20 years, and there are some facility issues there as well. But working together, we will decide what is the best and most appropriate way to maintain the building, and keeping in mind that we want to do a quality job at also being ever mindful of the price, then we will make sure that we get the best price so that it is the least impactful on our residents in terms of their property taxes.
Of course, I have questions. The $250,000 in our packet, I was trying to find where that number, how that's derived, and I didn't see an itemized. Did I miss that?
No, that was included. More information was included in the 2014 budget, and I'm certainly happy to give you some more additional information.
So and then there's no money for the city building maintenance or capital improvements for you're expecting the city to pay for all of that?
No, I'm saying that we will work together with the city to determine what is the most efficient way to do that. It may be through operating budget, it may be through capital bonds that the city would sell on our behalf, and then there would be debt service associated with that, but that'll be part of the larger capital improvement discussions that we have citywide.
But it's the library's responsibility. Are you saying, and my other question is, during these discussions, did the library want to purchase the buildings since you're independent now? I guess I'm concerned about the financial, we'll think about it later, we have a memorandum of understanding and we'll figure it out, versus, okay, it's going to be 50-50, and who's going to own what, or why doesn't the library just own the buildings, the properties? Then the other piece of it is, it's described as the library parking lot, and I would say that it's the one under the library is part of the building, but the lot adjacent to the library, are you considering that all one parcel with the library? That brings up a whole nother kettle of fish that I'm not sure that we want to put that parking lot in with the library, but the way that this is written, it incorporates it as part of this MOU, which is really problematic.
That description as library parking lot is the way that parking lot has always been described. It still remains under the purview and the responsibility of parking, the city's parking.
And my point is, there's no reason for that lot to be described in here in any way, shape, nothing. There is no correlation between that lot and library operations, and to connect them, I think is problematic for long-term for the city of Evanston, hence my concern with that. You get it.
I was only thinking about the library underneath.
That's
I never thought. Yeah,
right.
I know, you're right. I didn't even associate it with.
Yeah, well, but they're describing it as the library parking lot, and I would make sure that that's not part of this, and that it's the library adjacent to the parking lot adjacent to the library. Alderman Fisk?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I want to hear what Wally has to say, but I think basically you're correct, but it's also identifying that parking lot. The parking lot could easily be the Women's Club parking lot, or...
It has a number.
Right.
Yeah, parking lot, whatever it is.
Yeah, but I just don't know why it's part of this MOU is my point.
Right, right. No, I understand that.
Probably shouldn't be.
Yeah.
Regarding the issues of capital, the asset belongs to the residents of Evanston. we had talked over the course of, the better part of 2 years. How long have you been here? 2 years. 2+ years. About, how we would make those delineations. I think the focus has been moving forward on the maintenance, and that any expense associated with the maintenance, be it day-to-day maintenance or capital maintenance, capital repair, would be a responsibility of the library fund. And I think the question then comes, what is the best way for that revenue to be raised? I think having the library issue its own debt separate from the city of Evanston is probably not cost effective, but it can be allocated to the library fund, and the debt can be paid for through revenues that come into the library fund. So that has been our thinking and our discussions between the operating committee, Alderman Tendem, Alderman Fisk, and members of the library board, but not to have agreements that would transfer ownership of the properties. The properties belong to the residents of Evanston, and to assign a dollar value to have the library fund raise revenue, taking money from Evanston taxpayers to pay the city of Evanston. We kind of looked at it several different ways. We really couldn't come up with a way that made any sense. But moving forward, if the library were to acquire a new parcel for a branch library, let's say, that would be totally on the library fund. But moving forward, the capital maintenance, regular maintenance would be on the library fund.
Any other questions?
So, Madam Chair, members of the committee, I think I've heard at least one issue that probably needs some additional clarification. I think unless there's objections, we could, if you would like to hold this in committee, we could come back and clarify so that I'm clear that if we clarify the issue regarding the surface lot adjacent to the library.
And what is the 250? 250,000 seems really low to me, and I would like that. And I know we talked about it in the budget last year, but
we can come back with the itemized amounts
of what that really means. Alderman Fisk.
I just wanted to share with the committee, when Alderman Tendem and I were serving on the library committee, and we started out with a document that was really thick and heavy and unwieldy, and we've come down to something that is really very readable. It's very, very nice to see that, and I think the feeling among the committee members, staff bore a huge responsibility for streamlining this report and the process, and I think they did a really great job. And thanks for listening to all of the concerns, but it was really a pleasure to serve on the committee and have you be so responsive and end up with a document that's so eminently readable. So thank you.
Alderman Tendem, did you have something?
Yeah, it was a lengthy process. Over, like you said, quite a long period of time. But so the information to back up any statistics, any numbers, any budget are there as a working document. But also, as Karen said, as Ms. Danzig said, the last year's budget is key to really itemizing that lump sum of $250,000. So we can provide that very easily.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, we'll make those changes, bring back some additional information, and come back to your August meeting.
Great, thank you. Next up is items for consideration. The Human Rights Ordinance are you? Mr. Bobkowitz
tonight. I love
you're
what
back.
I do.
Fantastic.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, this is an item that was on a previous agenda, which we took back to work on additionally. Back in 2007, or at least the most current iteration back in 2007, and then also in 1997, when Ordinance 61097 was first adopted. The City Council has a long history of codifying in the Evanston City Code its beliefs regarding human rights, dealing most specifically with fair housing issues and fair employment practices. Over the last couple of years, we have noticed third parties around the United States looking at communities and their friendliness, their openness to members of the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender communities. And we've always thought ourselves as a community that in many different ways was welcoming, accepting of people of all types in Evanston. That's been a hallmark of this community for a very long time. And as we saw organizations evaluate communities, we were a little distressed to see that Evanston was not a part of that, and really was almost 18 months ago ago, and I asked Godwin Chin, our former local government management fellow, to look at some of the standards that are used to evaluate communities. And what we found was that, quite honestly, we ranked very high. While we had not been nationally evaluated, not part of the larger national discussion about communities, we felt very strongly that the city of Evanston had many of the things that were needed. Two things really stood out that we needed to make changes to, really to feel comfortable that not only we were a model, but really were a leader nationally in this area. One was the dedication of a specific a police officer at the police department to deal with LGBT issues, and we made that designation probably 6-9 months ago. The second part was looking at the portions of the Evanston City Code that dealt with fair employment, that dealt with fair housing, and compare them to best practice ordinances in communities that we like to compare ourselves to. And certainly this latest edition of the ordinance that you saw, we looked at Houston, Texas, and Tempe, Arizona, College Park, Maryland, Royal Oaks, Michigan, communities that really are held up around the country as having model ordinances. So I asked Jonathan Williams Kinzel, our current local government management fellow, to work with the law department to see if we could not come up with an ordinance. And certainly Alderman Tendam has been a part of these discussions for the last almost 2 years, and really raised with him very early on my concern that there was an opportunity for the city of Evanston to make some small changes, but really to help the larger national community understand how welcoming Evanston truly is, and how we really value diversity in our community in all ways. So, Madam Chair, members of the committee, we have before you tonight ordinance number 26014, which then creates a new Evanston Human Rights Ordinance. What it does is it takes much of what is already in the code, combines it into one section. It deals primarily with some changes to our definitions dealing with transgender individuals, again, to make sure that our language is consistent with best practices, and now is into one ordinance, into one section that it would be the City of Evanston's Human Rights Ordinance. A previous version had some different language dealing with enforcement, placing a role for the City of Evanston in an enforcement role. Upon further reflection, we really felt that that was not appropriate. Both Cook County and the state of Illinois have well-established, well-staffed organizations within their governments to do that. So this ordinance refers any complaints regarding how we conduct ourselves in the City of Evanston to be managed through a complaint process at Cook County or the state of Illinois. So, Madam Chair, members of the committee, we're happy to take questions. Alderman Tendam, I know you've been involved with this process. You may wish to say a few words as well.
Alderman Tendam.
Thank you. Yeah, I remember when I moved here in 1995, it was only 2 years later that the City Council, that back then, in their human rights ordinance regarding sexual orientation, included bi and transgendered people. And I remember thinking, like, I've really made a good choice here. This is a town that is really out to go far beyond any other city community in the state of Illinois, including Chicago at that time. So, I think the biggest issue we've had is really not sort of singing our own praises. We've always been a leader in this area, and to not have really that recognition is somewhat concerning, but it could be a good thing too. It could contribute to economic growth. It could attract a lot of young and middle-aged, older people. We're looking at seniors who are looking for places to retire that are friendly. We're looking at young people who want to work in an exciting environment that's very accepting. So I think this is really a good thing to pursue, and there are, like I said, there are a lot of opportunities to really sing our own praises and make sure this we're better understood as a community. But the council that back in 1997 that passed this, I would really like to thank, if any of them are listening, maybe Alderman Wynn and Alderman Rainey are. I hope they are, and because they were part of that council, and I think it was a unanimous decision to take that bold move. So thank you to them and the rest of that council, and thank you to staff and our manager for bringing this forward and getting this on our agenda tonight.
Alderman Braithwaite.
Thank you much, Madam Chair, and thank you, City Manager, for your work on this issue, and Alderman Tandem for your leadership on this issue. I guess my first question is, do we have any documented cases of discrimination against transgender residents?
Not that have come forward to the City of Evanston that I'm aware of, unless the law department is, Mr. Trito has been intimately involved in the drafting of this with Mr. Williams Kinzel. No. But in looking at best practice ordinances around the country, it was the language dealing with transgender individuals that our ordinance did not have what we felt was the most up-to-date language. Other parts of our ordinance, I think, were held up as we compare it to other communities as being rather strong. But no, I don't believe there's been any issues with transgenders.
Good. So in just reading through this over the weekend and given the current conversation that we've had, my next question is, so is there any national organization or conversation out there that will look at most livable cities for black people in general? I think I've seen statistics that will rank Evanston for our 30s. I've read other polls that the city manager sends out, so I would be very interested. I know what our current issues are, and I think we're dealing with them the best that we can, but it would be nice to know if there's a national conversation out there that will give us bullet points, metrics, or things to strive for to make us the most livable city for black residents. So I'd be real curious to know.
And Alderman Braithwaite, you've raised this issue before, and the research that we have done, there was a article in Jet Magazine probably 6 or 7 years ago that did not use matrices of any sort. I think it raised some general quality of life issues, and that's the only document that we've been able to find in the recent past for that. We are certainly happy to continue to look, but it was certainly not scientific and not something that I would want to hold up to the council. I don't know that I could, because there really were no specific matrices as we found with the LGBT issue, where there are, I think it's the Human Rights Coalition, is that the proper name?
Human Rights Campaign.
Human Rights Campaign, HRC, which has been doing, and then it was very easy for us to get information from them. They had a ranking system, and we sort of ranked ourselves based on that criteria. And we've not, again, in the research we did, which was probably 3 or 4 months ago now, found anything other than a magazine article that was probably more anecdotal than anything else.
Alderman Grover?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but the gist of the changes to our ordinance would be to combine some portions into, so we address the human rights issues in one place, and to update the ordinance then to include transgender residents.
Mr. Trito, if you want to elaborate on that, please.
Yeah, the addition is transgender residents are already there. It's gender identity is the actual term that's being used,
okay.
And also source of income, and that's a protected class already established underneath the Illinois Human Rights Ordinance as well as the Cook County Human Rights Ordinance.
And so those would be the two substantive changes, would be adding those two definitions, and then we're making it read better by combining the sections that were at one point in different places.
So essentially what we're doing is adopting, codifying, and reinforcing something that's already in place, and then just adding those two protected classes in the two areas that we needed to.
All right, Alderman Grover, you finished? Yeah. Okay. Alderman Tandem?
Thank you. I think one thing to consider, and there have been a few questions directed to me and the committee, why do we need this inclusion of LGBT spelled out, especially with regard to the position of the police department. But I think consider that LGBT community is a different sort of minority or group of minorities that really covers all other minorities, religious, racial, any other, wealthy, poor. And I think that what you'll find if organizations like HRC take an interest in us, there's a lot to be learned, not just for the LGBT community in general, but specific needs and concerns of, say, the Latino community or the Black community or any other community that has somewhat unique often unique issues with LGBT, particularly in the area of religion, religious association. Sometimes a steeper hill to climb for some people, and I think that's one thing that I think this community offers. We are about diversity, we are about equality, and I think that if we can apply that LGBT issues to all of our people, that to all that diversity, it makes a really strong statement and sets a good example. Keep in mind too that sometimes these issues, LGBT, are still somewhat secret, or not secret, but very private. If I don't know, if I went to and made a complaint that someone was being anti-Semitic, heard said, painted a swastika on my door, that would be an obvious, but that I'm Jewish, that this is intolerable, this is something that I would certainly object to. But for some people, the issue of LGBT or their sexual identity or orientation is still sort of, they may be out at work, oddly enough, but they may not be out to their families. They may not be out in the community that they live in. So, there is a little bit of sensitivity that needs to be considered, especially, I think, with police issues. And that, I think, we're providing. And, again, it's a way in which the LGBT people are a little more unique and different than any other minority.
Any questions? So I actually received some emails about just cleanups and edits in the ordinance, which I just emailed to you, to get to you. So minor, really changes, and just make sure that things are consistent, and some edits of wordsmithing, but everything else that's been emailed to me from residents has been covered. So what do you need from us, Mr. Bobkowitz?
We would ask that the committee recommend to the City Council the ordinance be introduced. Mr. Kinzel asked me to just reinforce one point. And that's really, while we're talking about the changes here dealing with LGBT, this is a human rights ordinance. And if you read the language, it covers really all the groups that have been talked about here. Again, I think it's really just an amendment of what we're trying to focus on with some language changes with the LGBT community, but it already talks about race issues and gender issues, and that language goes throughout. I think it's just a matter of being as inclusive as possible, that we respect everyone's rights here in the city of Evanston. So we would ask that the committee recommend to the full council introduction.
Great. Alderman Tindem, do you want to do the honors?
Sure. I recommend approval of ordinance 26014 to go to council.
I'll second it.
All those in favor? Aye. Great. Thank you. All right, next on our agenda is the lease renewal for Art Encounter. Any discussion?
I'm sorry, move approval.
Okay.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, great. Well, I wasn't sure if anybody wanted to. The next is lease renewal for Actors Gymnasium.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Lease renewal for Piven Theater.
Second.
Aye. No.
All those in favor? Aye. Can you wait, please?
No.
So tired. The next is authorization to collect debt for Next Theater promissory note. Mr. Bobkowitz, do you want to address this?
Madam Chair, members of the council committee, as I know that you're aware, we've had some issues with the rent collection with Next Theater. Next Theater has been a long-standing tenant of the Noyes Cultural Arts Center, was there from the very beginning, as put on probably some of the most interesting, innovative theater in Evanston. It has seen the growth and the emergence of several national actors and national playwrights, and has been an important part of our community. with that cutting-edge, leading-edge production over 20-plus years at the Noyes Center, they have seen their ups and downs. And at least one time in the 5 years I have been your city manager, they had gotten behind in rent because of the ups and downs of the theater industry. We were able to do an agreement with them to have them repay past rent, and that was paid in full within the terms of the agreement, and they moved on and continued to do wonderful things. A period of down times financially for the Next Theater started about 2 years ago. We had hoped to work with them in a similar fashion so that when good times came again, an agreement could be had so that that would all balance out. Unfortunately, in our estimation, and I want to thank Joe McCrae and Christina Ferrara of our Parks, Recreation, and Community Services Department for all of the work that they have done working not only with the staff of Next Theater, but also their board. It's clear that this has been a different circumstance, that the operations of the theater have been challenged. We have tried to work with them to resolve those, but it is clear to us that that may not be possible this time. So rather than continue to try to work through this quietly, unfortunately, we felt it was important to come to the council with sort of a two-prong approach. The first prong is the first item before you this evening, and that is a document, a promissory note to encapsulate the debt that is currently owed. Separate from that, we feel it's important to allow Next Theater to have one additional year at the Noyes Cultural Arts Center. They have already announced their season for the coming year, are already selling tickets. Again, if this were a business, I would not be recommending that you do this, but we are not a business, we're a municipal government. And I think it's prudent, given the important role that the Next Theater has played in our community, the people that they bring in. Quite honestly, if we were to not have them continue during the coming year, that theater would likely be dark for much of the coming year. As I think many of you know, it is split tenancy. The Fleetwood Jourdain Theater operates there June 1 through, about September 1, and then the balance of the year is Next Theater. If we were to evict Next Theater now after they'd already announced a season, I think that by that action alone, we might severely jeopardize Next being able to continue right now. And we would have the theater largely empty because any other theater company we might try to attract has already made their arrangements for the coming year. So by separating this out, by saying that there would be a promissory note to deal with the past rent, to have a one-year agreement which would end at the end of the current next season on May 31st, that now gives us opportunity to move forward and look for another tenant. I think we feel pretty confident that they exist and that we'll be able to find a tenant that will be able to program that theater in much the same way that Next has during the traditional school year, September to May timeframe. It's an unfortunate occurrence. The Next Theater has been a tremendous asset to the Evanston community, and I hope that perhaps something changes. Alderman Fisk and I had a few conversations over the last couple of weeks about this, and I think if there were a circumstance where things changed dramatically, that the debt could be paid immediately, that there was an interest for them to continue, I would be the first to bring back that for your consideration perhaps later in the current calendar year or at the beginning of next year, if that's a possibility. But if it's not a possibility, I think we owe it to the taxpayers of Evanston to make sure that the space is occupied by a going concern as quickly as possible to continue to bring not only rent to the Noyes Cultural Arts Center, but also theater goers, because that's been the beauty of the productions that Next has put on over these many years, is they have brought people from all over the Chicagoland area to Evanston. They've shopped here, they've dined here, and they've enjoyed a wonderful afternoon and evening of theater. And while if that's going to change, I think we still owe it to our residents to make sure that we then have a second theater company ready to come in 2015.
Alderman Fisk? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think this is a really reasonable way to approach this. I'm very reluctant to just pull the curtain down on Next Theater. I'm wondering, is there anyone here from Next Theater this evening? Anyone? There's not. Okay. So I want to thank the city manager for his thoughtful way of approaching this, of balancing the various varied interests here. Do we have any idea, Wally, of how much, how to assign a number of other community benefit that a theater of this type provides to the city?
You know, they had brought in, I don't know what the attendance figures are for their past season, but they were getting a few thousand folks in previous seasons who were coming, again, in that September to May timeframe, you know, driving here, taking the L here, doing different things here. So while there are matrices that you can assign each attendee a certain dollar amount, I wouldn't want to venture to guess what that is. But certainly a lot of life and activity, not only to the Noy Street area, but to downtown Evanston, for dining and for after theater drinking and revelry. So, and we tax revelry, as you all know, a little bit more than dining. So we like to see the revelry. But certainly it's been an economic engine, and I think that has to be a factor in looking at this, that to have the theater vacant for the coming, 9 months is not to anyone's benefit.
And I just hate the idea of, when we're looking at, a downtown performing arts district to be losing a theater company. I think it just, it works against those initiatives that we're trying to put into place.
And you've approved several leases tonight. All of those groups are fine creative groups, but I think if their representatives were here, they would say they're all fragile, that a bad production or a bad weather certainly, I think, came into play with Next Theater this past winter, as it probably did with Actors Gym, as it probably did with Pivens Productions. There's all those factors that come into play.
Alderman Grover?
Thank you. I'm one of those revelers who have, for the last 4 or 5 seasons, had a season subscription to Next Theater with my husband, with 2 neighbors, and we always spent money going out before. It was a great theater. It's always been, and I didn't know that Next was in trouble until reading the packet tonight. It looks like we'd be taking a promissory note that's largely unsecured, but it puts us in line with other creditors in Next Theater. There's not much else we can do, I think, to collect on the rent arrearage, and this is, I think, the smartest approach, and we can all hope that they'd have a great 2014-2015 season. I expect to resubscribe as well, and it's really been quality theater all along, and it's really too bad that Next has not been able to bounce back in the way that we anticipated, because I think it's been, as you said, Mr. Bobkowitz, it's fluctuated up and down, so anyway, I would support the proposal to take a promissory note for the arrearage.
Alderman Tendem?
Thank you. I too think it would be a huge loss for Next to leave Evanston. But I keep wondering where is the board? Where is their sense of responsibility? I'm sorry. Where their fiduciary responsibilities, why aren't they here tonight trying to shed a little light on how this came about, how we got to this point, and maybe giving us some sense of hope that they're interested in reviving and making this work? So I guess I'm calling on the board of directors to make a move, I guess. But I think we're doing the right thing, and I think that I think we're doing more than what's right, actually. I think we're being very generous, and in the end, I hope it all works out. But I think, we have to do what we have to do. So thank you.
But surely they've had some discussions with our staff to give us some kind of insight, I would think, over this last year. Do you think? Mr. McCray?
And our sense of it is that there was a disconnect between the operations of the theater and the governing board. And I think that has not been the case in previous difficulties. That certainly it was 2009, 2010. At that point, the staff and the board were shoulder to shoulder in trying to address their issues. In this instance, there seems to be a disconnect between that.
Alderman Braithwaite?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Alderman Tennum. I was actually going to raise the same issue. I'm I'm okay with the direction of staff. I also would have liked to have someone from the theater, whether it was a board or someone on their operations side, just to come and share some of their future goals or
And we'll ask that they
revenues.
come before the full council.
That would be nice. And then my second question is, where is the Tenants Association on this whole issue? Are they just now finding out, the same way we are?
Yes, I don't believe in, Ms. Ferraro was here earlier.
Well,
Mr. McRae.
Joe McRae, Deputy City Manager, Director of Parks, Recreation, Community Services. Yes, they're probably finding out the same way that you all are. Although there may be some awareness that there were some issues, but staff did not have discussions with the Tenants Association as a whole regarding the matter.
And I guess the reason that I asked the city manager just described, and he wasn't painting a picture, but just made a comment that a majority of some of our theater groups are fragile. So is this the only group that's in the building right now, Mr. McRae, that is behind on their rent?
We have, with these lease agreements, addressed all leasing concerns with all our different entities at this point in time. So this represents the last group that need to be addressed.
Alderman Fisk?
Thanks. I had two questions for you. I'd like you, even though we're going to do something about this tonight, I would like you to invite them to come next time and tell them that we are a little bit, I know Wally said that, but tell them we are a little bit concerned about that there may be a disconnect, and we'd like to hear something from them. I don't want to place too much blame or responsibility. Sometimes groups don't realize, if they're not experienced in coming and asking for funds or something, they don't realize that it would be a very good idea to actually come to a committee meeting. They may not know that. But anyway, next time it would be very nice to meet them and have them come and introduce themselves to the committee and share with us their vision and their plans. The other point I wanted to make is there anyone in our Economic Development Department that actually works with not-for-profits and helping them identify sources for fundraising? And I don't mean grants or things like that, but I mean helps them identify sources that they can go to either for professional help or some sort of support to get them to fundraise, because they need to do a huge fundraising program. I mean, they really do. And I think that they're more than capable of doing that. But we need to hear from them in that regard as well.
Just a really quick response, and I'll let the city manager speak. First off, Alderman Fisk, they are aware of the meeting that's happening tonight and the actions that we're proposing to the committee. We did advise them of the time of the meeting, and so the board is aware of that.
Did you tell them it would be in their best interest to come and make a statement?
We did share with them that it
Okay, they should have
might
done
be a
that.
good idea, but they could not attend tonight, so that's what they said to us at that point in time. So. Okay.
Alderman Fisk, members of the committee, I know that Mr. Farrar received a phone call this evening from the board chair. I think that there were some legal concerns that were expressed by the board chair to Mr. Farrar. We'll attempt to sort through those as far as they're appearing this evening, but they did contact Mr. Farrar. So we'll talk further with them between now and next week when this will be up for introduction and deal with that. As I said, there has been a disconnect between the staff and the board. There's a new executive director that I believe Jennifer was hired 2 weeks ago. And so that individual is now on board. But I think that the board is also concerned about that disconnect and the ramifications that it has for their company, their nonprofit corporation. And so that, I think, has led to, in part, why there's no one here this evening. But we will convey this discussion and do everything we can to have a representative here.
Because now I'm hugely concerned.
Yes.
So-
But they want to move forward. The board chair was quoted in the Chicago Tribune this morning indicating as such. But we'll have a representative here at your next meeting.
Okay, do we have I'm assuming, do you want us to hold this here, or do you want us to move on? Okay, can we have a motion? Do we have a second? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Did you?
And there was just, Mr. McCray reminded me of one other question I didn't answer, was the economic development piece. John and Iden has been working with all of our nonprofit arts organizations and has connected several of them to Evanston businesses that have been very helpful. I don't know that we've done any consulting. I know we haven't done any specific fundraising consulting, but we have helped a number of groups find additional benefactors in the community, including Next Theater. So we'll continue that process.
Thank you. The next item is the lease agreement for next. We also need a motion to move that forward. We did the authorization to collect the debt and then we separated it. So lease agreement. Do you have a second? All those in favor? Aye. Thank you. Next on the agenda is the 2014 Emergency Solutions Grant application. Always good to see you at the podium.
Good evening, Chair Burris and members of the committee. I'm Sarah Flax, the Housing and Grants Administrator for the city. This is simply, once we got our grant amount from HUD, we had to come back and say what the actual dollars were that were allocated on a percentage basis in the action plan. So the committee approved the percentage last fall. The committee and the council then approved that again. So this is really a formality.
Okay. Alderman Grover.
I move approval of the Housing and Homelessness Commission and staff's recommendation for our 2014 Emergency Solutions Grant allocations.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Well, that was fast. Great. IHDA Abandoned Property Grant. Do we have anyone talking about that? Do we have a second?
Let's get that 75,000.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Fantastic. Okay. General Assistance Report. Is that anybody?
Not anybody. Madam Chair, members of the committee. Alana Thomas Smith, the Director of Health and...
Well, nobody jumped up, so I wasn't sure. I didn't mean it
to pop up like popcorn.
Our intention, Madam Chair, members of the committee, is to come to you, perhaps not every month, but certainly several times during the course of the year with an update on what was the general assistance operation of Evanston Township. We'll be giving updates to the Administration and Public Works Committee on the assessor function, the former assessor function, but we'll continue to come to this committee with an update on our general assistance program. So Avanda is here to give a report, and we certainly would like your feedback either this evening or afterwards to make sure that this is the kind of information you're looking to get. Again, we probably won't be doing this monthly, but several times a year.
And Mr. Babkowitz, I actually wanted, you just said something about the assessor's piece. It would be great to have someone come and give updates similar to what Bonnie did tonight, because many people did not get their exemptions, and it's costing them a lot of money. That would be helpful.
And our plan would be to do that in Administration of Public Works. So at the meeting next week, Mr. Lyons will be able to speak to it.
That's fine. Thank you. Hello.
Thank you. Chair Burris and members of Human Services Committee, I'll be respectful of the time. I know you have information in your packet, but I'll just do some quick highlights and some recommendations and introduce you to Indira Perkins, who is our new General Assistance Specialist and has been working with the city on this process since February. So in the report, we share with you some updates about the General Assistance Program and the Emergency Assistance Program. I just want the community to be aware that this program is a financial aid program. It requires or allows for essential medical care, treatment, and supplies to be provided to the participants of the program. Participants who are on the program are entitled to personal assistance, which is a total of $300 month and who are eligible for rental assistance to the tune of $200 per month. But as it relates to general assistance caseload, it has fluctuated. There have been many questions around that fluctuation, but since January of 2014, there was approximately 188 participants. But through our intention of establishing some creative partnerships to make sure we provide wraparound services and not duplication of services, we've partnered really close with Connections for the Homeless, where Indira reaches out to the case manager, sometimes on a weekly basis, to just really access or really learn of those clients that are either chronically homeless or transient homeless. And in that relationship, what we've learned is we had more transient homeless participants than we realize, and basically what that means is that Connections provides shelter for a total of 90 days, and after that maximum amount of time of 90 days, then participants are either moved around the community or some actually leave the community. So since our intention around making sure that this program is compliant with its rules and regulations, some of our constituents have self-disclosed that they no longer live in the community. During our partnerships, we've learned that some have gained employment, which is the goal of the program, and some have gained stable housing but have relocated outside of the Evanston community. So that resulted, since January, a total of about 50 clients that have been released or terminated from the program. But during that time, we also had an intake process where we actually enrolled about 37 participants who were eligible for the program and had recently learned of the program through some of our marketing and outreach, or who became ineligible due to life circumstances. During this time of transition, we've had several town hall meetings where I've met with the participants in a large group setting. I've done that twice since January. I've met with the participants individually. I actually administered a grant distribution myself to make sure that I had conversations with the participants and reminded them of their rights and responsibilities for the program. And Indira can talk more about the outcome of those discussions. But many have asked, how are people getting terminated from this entitlement program? And what I'll share with you is, again, from the period of April, May, and June, some participants actually gained meaningful employment and were actually over income. Some were non-compliant due to residency issues, hospitalizations, incarcerations, treatment programs, or became recent recipients of Social Security benefits, which then made them ineligible for the program. And the one relationship that I want to make mention of that's in your report is a relationship that we've established with the YWCA of North Shore, where they are providing ongoing financial literacy workshops. The participants really got excited about that because for whatever reason, some of our participants were still using the currency exchange to cash their benefits, and now they're learning that they can actually get checking account, savings account, and become credit worthy to manage their finances differently than in the past they've managed them. So I want to thank Alderman Grover for bringing that partnership to my attention, and Alderman Braithwaite for making sure that the staff got in touch with myself and our staff to make sure that partnership has been successful and the participants actually love it. We've had 80 participants go through 2 workshops that they provided free of charge to us. Also, I want to update you about the uninsured participants that are enrolled in the County Care Program. We have over 100 participants out of the 188 that have actually enrolled and are seeking care, getting care, even though they're in medical eligible status. So even though they don't have a physical card, they are in care, receiving care, and have primary care. And that's through the fantastic partnership of Erie Family Health Center. So recommendations for growing the program, we're recommending that we have additional outreach to increase our capacity to serve participants, to make sure that those eligible families that are out there that are eligible for this program receive it. We're recommending continued collaboration with our nonprofit organizations to assure wraparound services to decrease duplication of supportive efforts. We're also recommending to correct some efficiencies, such as there's a great need for adult dental services and a great need for optometry. We have many of our participants that can't can't get gainful employment because they cannot see and cannot read the applications. So we're trying to establish those ongoing partnerships to address that. Our community health survey, as you notice in your packet, disclosed to us that there is a need for a deeper and meaningful engagement in tobacco cessation for our participants, and again, seeking that dental coverage. So I'm going to step aside at this time and allow Indira Perkins, who works intimately with the participants right now, and just share with you some other concerns that have been brought to us regarding policy enforcement for the program.
Alderman Braithwaite.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Two quick questions. First, a statement. I'm glad that you asked for a monthly report. I'll definitely look forward to you coming back on a regular basis just to see how some of these statistics change over the course of the year. You indicated in terms of the number of participants that are taking advantage of Erie. So one of the numbers that jumped out at me was on page 93, the 37% of participants who use the emergency room.
Yes.
And so I don't know if you want to speak to that, but I'll be paying very close attention to that figure.
Sure. And we learned that the day of the actual screening at Erie Family Health Center, the participants actually took the survey that day.
That's what,
and so those numbers are reflective of that survey, and our hope that in a year's time, after we've seen the benefit of Affordable Care Act, that those numbers will significantly change for the constituents.
Okay, thank you. And then the second question is more of a concern that was raised by a member of the community. Unfortunately, she left, or else I would have identified her, but she said specifically that the requirements for general assistance is changing, and so she wanted to ask myself and Alderman Holmes to meet with a group of residents. So I'm listening to you. You shared that you've had meetings with the residents, with the participants. You've shared that you've handed out the checks, which I think is probably a wonderful opportunity to also connect. So can you help me to understand where that concern is coming from, Director
Sure. I'm going to allow Indira to address that because we've established a relationship with the Illinois Department of Employment Securities and can speak directly to that concern.
Thank you.
But before she speaks, I was just going to say, I simply want to say that I've had nothing but good reports. I've been pleasantly surprised, and also from referrals that I've made to the department since the turnaround. And it was somebody reminded me today in terms of how long actually you've been doing this. So we had a few months to do it. So I'm not sure where that's coming from. I've heard that concern, but I don't know where it's coming from, because I think the participants of the program are not expressing that. Okay?
Yeah, it was just one individual, Alderman.
I hear you.
Thank you.
Alderman Grover, and then we promise we'll let you have the mic.
Well, sure. Thank you, Director Thomas Smith, and thank you in advance, Ms. Perkins, very much. What's not to like about the direction that we're heading with the General Assistance Program? My compliments on everything that you've done, every step you've taken, from the introduction to Erie to enrollment of our General Assistance clients in health care coverage, whether it's county care or the Affordable Health Care Act, to participating in a health survey, which is a great baseline way to tap into what's going on in their lives. And it astonishes me to understand that so many of our general assistance clients assume that the township was a medical provider, a medical provider, direct service provider, which is what we did not want to be in the business of. And then the partnership with the YWCA and the financial literacy, that's Ms. Pat Hunter and Karen Singer, who have been great partners in this. And they'll tell you that it began 2 or 3 years ago when Alderman Braithwaite and I did the financial literacy workshop, when we started making the connections between what residents needed and what they didn't know, and how to help them. So I think it's all really good news, and I'm sure Ms. Perkins is going to tell us even more good news. So I'm sorry for the interruption of your presentation, but it's got to be said that we are heading in such a great direction in meeting the needs of our neediest. And thank you very much, Director Thomas Smith.
Thank you. I'm going to pass out some information. She's going to share the information with you in response to those questions, but I want to give you the documents as well.
You're on a timer.
Chair Burris and members of the Human Services Committee, my name is Indira Perkins, and I'm a current General Assistance Specialist. Since being in this role, I've been able to attend two-day trainings, the first being a training on general assistance in Effingham, Illinois. Myself and Director Thomas Smith attended this training, and we discovered many helpful ways on how to better utilize the resources we do have here in the community. We discovered that participants were not to receive rental payments directly if they own their property, but that we were to make these payments towards their biannual Cook County taxes. We have since met with each participant that this applied to, and the participants have been extremely helpful in providing us the information needed to make their payments for them. Budget evaluations were also discussed, and factoring in unemployment benefits and any work that our participants may have obtained was also beneficial. Myself and Director Thomas Smith also had an opportunity to attend an additional training last month in Carbondale. This was a very helpful training which gave us instructions on how medical insurance claims are to be processed and more tips on reducing the cost of prescription medication. This has been one of Director Thomas Smith's huge targeted goals. And in an attempt to recoup medical and medication costs, the Coast to Coast program was re-implemented in January of 2014. The Coast to Coast discount program was reinstituted with the assistance of Erie Family Health Center. And the cost savings has been significant, and we get medications from Erie for our general assistance participants at no cost. The Coast to Coast prescription program reimburses the city for using the program, and since January of 2014, we have saved 61% in savings we've seen since January of this year. Participants, one of the things that you stated, I will address now. Participants are required to register with the Illinois Department of Employment Security. And currently registered participants mean that preceding 30 days, they are registered with the Illinois Department of Employment Security. We have implemented the policy that gives each of our participants a full month to comply with this request. Our participants are notified during the previous month of when verification of this is to be submitted. We have also developed a calendar, which we have distributed for our participants that will show due dates quarterly of when this is due. Most of the participants have been compliant with this request, but initially we did have some challenges on compliance with this. Section 3, which Director Thomas Smith distributed, outlines the requirements and exemptions of the current requirements for the IDES registration. We have listened to and welcome feedback from our participants and have made a connection with the IDS office, and now clients have a direct link to a supervisor there that can assist them with any issues. The positive outcome to this is that participants also can register online, and some participants have discovered that they were actually eligible for unclaimed employment benefits, which is huge for our clients because they were unaware of this prior. We want our participants to understand that they do have rights as outlined in the Notice of Rights and Responsibilities, which Director Thomas Smith also distributed to you. And we also let our participants know that as recipients, they also have certain responsibilities and requirements that they have to adhere to as a participant in our program. If anyone is seeking additional information, they can contact our office directly at 847-448-8112. And someone from our office will answer any questions that you might have. Our hours are Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 5, and we hope to have additional information on the Health Department website. Any questions?
No, thank you. So your first time presenting to the committee?
Very first time.
You did very well.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I actually just want to echo something Alderman Holmes said is that I think going into this with the township being dissolved and the city taking over, there were so many unknown unknowns, and people were afraid of change. And to see where we've come from and people work together and making such a difference in these people's lives, I think that's why we all voted to do this, even though maybe some were like, oh, we're not sure that we want to do this. We have made a difference, and I thank you for coming on board. Thank you for spearheading this, Yvonne, but I really haven't heard any real negatives in making many more people having better services, so thank you.
Thank you.
We can do this in many other areas of the city as well. We just have to be willing to change, so thanks.
Thank you.
Sarah, are you up?
No.
No. Are we done?
No.
Chief, oh, I'm sorry. Cannabis, marijuana, please come on up.
Let's fix this too.
I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Hello. What were you doing in the back row there?
I know I don't get a vote, but I was going to second being done. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I wanted to talk briefly about some controlled substance issues that have come before the committee. On March 10th, a Northwestern student, Marco Pasovic, made a proposal that the city begin to mirror some policies of Portugal in handling the administrative adjudication of drugs other than cannabis. Based on that request, I asked the legal department to prepare an opinion, and let me read in part the summary of that opinion. The city does not have the authority under the Illinois Constitution to handle or prosecute controlled substance cases under city ordinance. The Controlled Substances Act clearly identifies the possession and or trafficking of controlled substances felonies under Illinois law. The Illinois Constitution explicitly excludes felonies from the jurisdiction, from the local jurisdiction of home rule units. The city would exceed its constitutional powers if attempted to prosecute controlled substance cases via city ordinance. It is clear that the General Assembly wanted the punishment of controlled substance arrestees to be maintained as a matter of exclusive state concern. That, I hope, will address the concerns that a scheduled topic for August, that that part of any expansion of drug laws other than cannabis control are clearly beyond our purview. I think that with that said, the steps that the City Council has taken to take cannabis control out of a total criminal prosecution mode and into compliance tickets has been implemented as well underway, and I think we'll see that from the slides we're about to go through this evening. Let's see. This slide shows the data trend for arrests and compliance tickets. The green line is the total compliance tickets, total arrests and compliance tickets for under 30 grams. The blue line is the criminal arrest. The red line is the compliance tickets for under 10 grams. You will see those red lines continue to accelerate in 2012 and 2013. That's the years that the ordinance was in full effect. And so the understanding of the police department was the direction of the council was to decriminalize as much of these minor possession arrests as possible, and I think we have complied with that direction of the council. And so far in 2014, that trend line continues. This next slide shows the outcomes of...
Alderman Grover has a question.
That's...
Blue bars are really the arrest for possession of fewer than 30 grams would be arrestable.
Yes.
So it's between 10 and 30 grams that one becomes subject to arrest. Fewer than 10 grams in compliance tickets are a more likely possibility. So the blues are really more arrests.
Yes.
It's a nice trend. Thank you.
Also, I do want to point out several things that are significant in this. Even with the change to a primarily ticket system, if you are a juvenile, your parents are still contacted. We don't write kids cannabis tickets and send them on their way. That's not how this works. And so there is that parental notification and intervention when we have those events.
I do remember that as being part of our conversation when we considered the decriminalization.
Alderman Braithwaite?
Just a quick question, Chief. So then when they come to court, is there a dollar amount that they're fined?
Yes, there's a fine range that is up to the discretion of the administrative judge.
Or community service, whatever
Yes.
sense? Okay, thank you.
And we have as luck would have it, somebody on my staff anticipated that question, and this next chart shows the breakdown of what's available. The green section of the pie chart deals with the community service, total number of tickets issued, and the total number of tickets paid. And those are statistically relatively similar for those 2 years. And so our experience, the only area that we exceed this percentage of payment is in seatbelt tickets. Those are paid at a much higher rate than other city administrative adjudicative tickets that come through that system. Are there any questions that I can answer?
Any questions? I actually have a question about the community service in lieu of fine. How is that administered, and is it any community service, or do we have directive community service? The reason I ask is, go ahead and answer the question.
No, Alderman, please.
I know we have partnerships with agencies, and I know the Moran Center is one where, and they have someone here, because I've been to court lots of times with and they have someone here at court that goes out and talks to the person in terms of what kind of community services stuff they can do. So it happens all at the same time.
Okay. The reason I bring that up is that also could be something that aligns with our council goals of things that we want people to be doing in the community to help in whatever way. So having it much more of a targeted, not that they can do anything, but what can they do to really impact our goals and what we want to do in the community. You know, again, looking at this wraparound, comprehensive, we want to focus on making a dent somewhere in the community. So all the things that we're doing, we can make an impact on that. So just thinking of community service in a different way.
And if I may, the administrative judges are attuned to that concept, and they utilize that option whenever they feel it's appropriate.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for all your work.
Thank you.
Now, Sarah? Okay. It's late, okay?
Thank you, Chair Burris. We included as communication the quarterly update on the tenant-based rental assistance program. This program was approved last summer as a way of addressing the needs of families with children in our school who were unstably housed. And as you all know, I'm sure that one of the most difficult things is to have good family outcomes when you are not living together as a family unit, and when you have all the challenges of moving from place to place, and maybe not even, in many cases, we would have parents who might have one child with one family friend, and it's impossible to raise your children and have good outcomes and work, as many of these are single-parent households, work on their own issues to get the employment skills to be able to earn a living wage. So the TBRA program uses our home dollars to provide stable housing. Each family is put in an apartment of their choice they work with. That has to be an appropriate apartment, obviously, for their household size, but ideally in the ward or area that is where their child's school is and is convenient for them or close to their work. They are also getting wraparound services from Connections for the Homeless, including employment training. We have had all of our households in compliance so far with all of their primary goals. We have one household that is going to be moving or has moved. I'm not sure exactly what, but that was a family totally moving out of the area. It has nothing to do with anything in the program specifically. I think one of the remarkable outcomes is, frankly, these are some of the most unstable households in our community, that all have been compliant thus far. Short period of time, but nonetheless, I think it's a really good start. We'll continue to provide updates on a quarterly basis, and if there are specific pieces of information that are useful or that you're looking for in addition, we would welcome hearing that so we can make these reports as useful as possible.
Great. Alderman Holmes.
Sarah, I know we're working in partnership with Connections for the Homeless, but do you have any direct contact with District 65?
Yes. Well, I personally don't have as much as Mary Ellen does.
As Mary Ellen.
But yes.
Okay, but someone from our staff does, because I've had complaints from District 65.
And we actually, Mary Ellen and I were just recently speaking with Judith Treadway. One of the interesting challenges is because our school district covers a part of Skokie, one of the things we had to clarify is that if the children are in Bessie Rhodes or in Walker, but the family is actually living in Evanston in 60201 or 60202, they are in fact eligible. We clarified that. That was one question. One of the challenges with our home funds is we are supposed to use them in Evanston. So it's one of the, when you have a cross-jurisdictional area like our Skevinston, it makes it a little bit of a challenge. But we've resolved that one.
Alderman Braithwaite.
And I guess I want to follow up on Alderman Holmes' question. I've heard similar concerns regarding just 665 parents, Sarah, and I've also been in touch with Ms. Judith Treadway. And so is there someone at the Connection staff that specifically works with the District 65 families?
The caseworkers, the program heads and the caseworkers will work with District 65. On an individual basis, in some cases, the caseworkers work with the school social workers. There are multiple levels of people working together, assessing families and then working with them once they're in the program. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question.
I guess what I'll ask it a different way then. Is there a specific pot of money set aside strictly for District 65 families? Within our relationship with the Connections from the Homeless?
The TBRA money was designated by council for families with children under the age of 18. Not all of them have to be in District 65 schools.
Okay, so that's a pool of
But Sarah, can you go back just once more? Because that 60203, which is Evanston, makes it very difficult. I don't know what we do about that, because that...
What we do is, because our home funds we're supposed to be using them in our geographic jurisdiction. It doesn't matter if the kids are going to the schools there. We just need to then have their apartment in 60202 or 60201.
So, Alderman, part of the issue, I'm familiar with this situation where the parent used the Skokie address because they didn't have any other address, and it was misunderstood.
Exactly, but if the kids are in the schools, it doesn't matter. Right. We can work with them.
I understand that. I wasn't talking about that particular case, because Judith did explain that to me, but I'm just wondering, because it becomes confusing, not only for us here, but other things. I mean, you either live in it says Evanston, Illinois, and then you have 3 zip codes. I don't know even why we have 3 zip codes if you can't use them, as Evanston. They say they're Evanston, so it does make a difference.
The university has its own zip code within Evanston.
Yeah,
right. Well,
and if you have a post office box, you have 04.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
exactly.
so it's another one.
Right.
Yeah. So.
But those types of issues, whenever, and we greatly appreciate if you hear any of those issues, please refer them to Mary Ellen or me. We will troubleshoot and find out and get to the bottom of it, because in this case, it was just, okay, that's Skokie, isn't it? Well, no, it is sort of. Go ahead.
I guess a quick question, Sarah, then you can feel free to inbox me, is can you ask Connections for the Homeless how many District 65 families they've actually placed in housing for this year?
Sure. I will confirm of the households, how many of them have children in District 65 versus in District 202.
Right. Out of how many referrals? That's my question also.
Oh, out of the total referrals? Well, in the memo, it shows all of the people considered. So,
But see, again, I want to be able to go back to this person who raised the concern and identify to her that X amount of families have been served who we can tag as District 65. So it may be a direct question to Connections for the Homeless, and I think this data will at least confirm the perception or show that that's not the case.
I will get you the total people who have applied and been considered, and the total who had children in District 65, and the total in District 60 with children in District 65 who've been accepted in the program.
Yeah, that's
Okay,
it.
absolutely.
Thank you. As always, you're thorough. Appreciate it. All right, I think we're done. Motion?
So moved.
Second? All those in favor of adjournment? Sorry, I tried to get us out before 10.
Done.
Done.